Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Curse, and Purrs. My name's Leslie, and I'm finally going to discuss the last book for my interview with the Vampire Inspired Readathon, focused on Claudia's bookshelf. I'm going to go ahead and read a quote today. It is said that the camera cannot lie, but rarely do we allow it to do anything else, since the camera sees what you point it at. The camera sees what you want it to see. The language of the camera is a language of our dreams. And that's from page 35 of The Devil Finds Work by James Baldwin. A brief little info on James Baldwin, born in 1924 and passed away in 1987. This book was published in 1976 and it's 127 pages long, so it's a very short and quick read. It's nonfiction essay collection. I think I just said that. And it's fulfilling the prompt that Claudia loves theater and movies and the AMC's adaptation. So read a book that's focused on movies or theater. And so this book has 3 essays, and they're really digging into not just movies, plays as well, and a couple of I say movies and plays that are discussed are The Last of the Mohicans and The Heat of the Night, the autobiography of Malcolm X, and Macbeth. But the essay is not limited to that. Like, for instance, I think towards the end, the author even discusses Exorcist. But I don't want to name like every single movie that the author focuses on. I really enjoyed this essay collection, and you know what? It's James Baldwin, and I don't know if you could tell, but like right above me, I have some James Baldwin, some up over here. Plenty of his books that I've read of his, and there's plenty more that I need to read. Once again, what James Baldwin does so well is just like this steering, laser sharp critique, and his eyes are just like focused on largely cinema in this. And the points that I think he was trying to drive home is there is him as a viewer, a black gay man, and then there's the lens in which like cinema is like projecting, and so there has to be some consideration for who's creating the project, the directors, the writers, the cast, and what are they capturing. So that also has to do with like identity, focusing in on like racial identity, and also focus like on the American lens. So we have him as a viewer, even like from childhood, and he's looking at a screen and not seeing himself represented. And something interesting about how he goes into that is also when someone lacks representation, and for him, he's specifically speak to like racially, then there is this seeking or looking at actors, not just characters, but actors, and saying like, oh, I think I identify with them um as a black person, but not just him, but he's like projecting on like, oh, I see this person and I see them through like as connected to a black identity in a way. So that was an interesting conversation because ultimately he's saying when someone doesn't have the representation, they're gonna seek it and like apply it someplace. And that was like I don't know, I just appreciated that conversation that he was having and like extrapolating on that. And so there's that from how he's feeling from his end, but then he's also discussing what like cinema's projecting. For instance, if uh, if the writers are not diverse, for instance, and they're speaking to a culture or racial identities that aren't theirs, and that's because the money behind it won't allow that. You know, there's like that gatekeeping and racism. Then what's going to happen is there's going to be people that are trying to capture someone else's racial experience or and cultural dynamic, and that's going to how how do I say this? It's going to create problems. It's going to create like stereotypes, um, and just like racist caricatures. And so he goes into like different examples of that, and also talks about, like, let's say for instance, oh, I can't think of which movie it was. I'm picturing it in my head, but I can't think of it. But like also looking at class issues. And like there's one particular movie that he used an example, which I thought was a great one, because he was saying even like the movie itself, like the premise doesn't make sense um because of the class issues. It's almost being like because this particular movie had to do specifically with talking about like racial dynamics, it was almost like being too nice at that time with how like white people would react to a certain dynamic in a racist society. And so it just was unrealistic to try to have this fictional movie portray realities and issues with racial injustices, but not really like fully going into reality and like that experience actually is. And so I felt like that's so, unfortunately, I hate to say this, I'm sure so many people are tired of this word, relevant, because it's 2025 and that continues to be a problem, right? We have movies that I think that are incredible, like movies like Sinners, or we have movies like I know this is not the same thing, but um I had to bring home a point, but it's like that movie Crazy Rich Asians, and before that, a movie with an all Asian American cast was the Joy Luck Club, which is like several decades before. So it's just like interesting that he's talking about all these movies that are could be great, they could be mediocre, they could be bad, it could be all those things, but I feel like they're allowed to be that because it's either solely or majority like a white, not just like movie, but just project overall, from like beginning it from the who you see in front of the camera to who's behind it. But when it comes to movies that are portraying other racial dynamics or other cultures that are not white, then it's almost like they're just not put up to the same standard, I guess you could say. And that doesn't seem fair because I also feel like those two movies I'm using as examples are capturing experiences and having deep conversations, but with nuanced experiences. And so, and then they do well in the box office, and then we don't see movies like that again um, for decades later. Like for instance, for like I said, like the Joy Luck Club and Crazy Rich Asians. It's like, oh yeah, you can make popcorn movies, and they can have a diverse cast that we don't get to see all the time. And it's like I'm going off on a tangent, but it's almost it's like frustrating. Also, me as a person that loves watching movies, a moviegoer, and thinking like, oh, I just love great storytelling, and having to hear people, creatives, say like how hard it is to get something greenlit because they're being told people won't watch it. It's just especially since argument with people with money saying that people that look like me won't watch it is such a lie. Like I just want good storytelling, you know. Hey everyone, editing Leslie here. I wanted to just like hone in and refine my point I was kind of getting to, but then my brain did a little swirl and went off somewhere else. All right. So in terms of art and commerce and how I over time I've heard from creatives say that like those in power with money are using the false narrative that basically they're catering to like a white demographic. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is that it shouldn't matter. That shouldn't even be a factor because basically that in itself is a uh, just like reinforcing racism. If someone's saying like, oh well, this group of people watches movies and this group of people don't watch movies, it's also like what is that word, like manifest destiny when someone's doing that, because one they're starting off with like uh data based on racism, and then they're just going in a circle and then like reinforcing it by not giving creatives a chance, um, because they want to make original films and have them be diverse. And ultimately, it shouldn't matter if someone looks like me, is wants to see original narratives or not. That shouldn't even be a basis in the first place, because that just continues the problem. And that's something that James Baldwin is getting at, when he's saying that as a kid, because he was so depleted of seeing representation, he would then seek representation through people that don't even represent his community, but he felt like, he could find like a connection in a way and apply it. And so that I thought that was really important to add to the point I was making. And on top of that, when I was reading this book and thinking about what James Baldwin was saying, I kept thinking about that movie American Fiction. That's another layer to the conversation, really, um, because that's about, um, an author that's happens to be black, and he's writing books, but they're not selling the way other books, because other writers, are and are like, I guess you could say, catering to a white audience. So once again, it's that problem again about who gets catered to. And additionally, I just watched a really great, not just watch, actually like about a month ago, time flies, a really great discussion on the Drunk Banthas channel. They had a conversation because there's an author that's quite controversial. I haven't read his stuff, um, and they're quite successful. And so they're just having a conversation about that author and their thoughts and feelings. And it's very much in line to the conversation that American Fiction was having. And so I was just kind of rolling with that in my mind, and I wanted to discuss those. And I'm definitely going to leave, in the details, a link to Drunk Bantha's discussion about that author, as well as, a link to the trailer for American Fiction. I'm sure everyone knows about that, but just in case, if you haven't heard about the movie American Fiction, I just appreciated, both the discussion and what that like movie was saying. And yeah, all right. So back to the other Leslie. Circling back to that, I think all of that is something that, James Baldwin is really tapping into when he's having these conversations. And so, yeah, once again, it's here's a person that wants to see them represented, and another, and on the other end, here's, the white supremacist narrative saying like, well, let me show you how you should be represented, instead of letting people just represent themselves, or like it should just be that way. I don't know how else to say it, but I loved this collection. Like I always did love James Baldwin. That's why I'm like, I'm not sure how much more else I could say about that. Um, so with that said, I'm going to leave that there so I don't get too repetitive. And let's discuss the three questions I have for my readathon. So why does the character Claudia have this on her bookshelf? Um, there's a couple of reasons that made me think of Claudia while I was reading this. Hmm. Hopefully, I'll say this in a cohesive way. One is, yes, she does love cinema. There's that really like beautiful scene in Interview with the Vampire in season one, where Lestat, Louis, and Claudia go to the movie theater, and then they go home and they like are reenacting, what was it? Was it Dracula? What was it? They're just like so tickled by that. Um, and I thought there's like this silliness to movies that kind of like brings the family together. Um, and so that's going to be like a fond memory for her. Uh, Also, there's the idea of like delusion, or what I like to call, I like to use Twilight Zone example or the Matrix. Sometimes I'm like, all right, yeah, we're in the Matrix. Some people took one pill, want to live in the delusion, and some people are in reality. And I would say that she, is in a family where there's two people that are raising her that are in a delusion, to some extent, and she's a bystander of that and a survivor of that. But also, there is a beautiful scene that she has with Louis where she has this like father daughter moment where they're out fishing on the boat, basically, is what the scene is. And they're actually having a conversation about love. And Louis, I guess because she's like a teenager and she's just brought into this family and was like grasping the fact that Louis and Lestat are a couple. And Louis says, like, oh, well, love is just love. So that's just how we love. And I always love that. And I feel like that just planted a seed for Claudia to accept that, but I feel like be open to love in a way. That if she didn't have them as parents, she may not have been open to a relationship, depending on how she moved through the world, not being raised by them. Um, and then maybe she wouldn't even given Madeline a chance, if that makes any sense. I was just thinking about that. But because she had an example of people just loving each other because they just do, I think that's really beautiful. Uh, that could be we could go in a big circle about that because of the situation she gets puts in. But yeah, I also think that this James Baldwin is also in a way tapping into that. Right, there's the reality of our world and actually, I'll say the United States because that's all I guess we do to the racial dynamics in the states and that construct, and then so it almost feels like, yeah, it does feel like sometimes like the Twilight Zone. What I'm getting at is then she'll step into the theater and and James Baldwin is seeing like a projection of what these writers, directors, creators are thinking, how he should exist, right? And so I think she would also see that on the screen. She would also be experiencing that, right? And that's kind of like interesting, to see experience, but then how does she see and experience that in her own life, being a vampire and navigating the world as it's changing, right? And she doesn't age. Um, so it's a lot. And the second question: did this book recontextualize a character for you? Uh, I think, yeah, in some ways it does. You know what also made me think about? I'll say in terms of contextualizing, it really makes me like hone in on that moment in season one where, oh my gosh, I can't think of his name right now. Um, where Claudia, Lestat just took her out to eat like on Lover's Lane. And so now she's a teenager. She's reached a certain age and she starts taking clothes from her victims, like her adult female victims, to look more like uh, what she thinks an adult woman version of her should look like, even though her body is not changing. So she's trying to use clothing as a way to connect to like her age and like and just maturing. And she does see like two women from across the street, and I can't remember if they said it out loud or if they were she was reading their minds, but they say something like nasty to her, basically from across the street. And yeah, I think about like what James Baldwin is saying about not truly being represented, and then having to see a character and kind of like I guess you could say uh like racial stereotypes, and then how Claudia goes on out into the world, and then how other people perceive her, and that can be like so frustrating because that's not really who she is. She knows who she is, and then but then she has to deal with everyone projecting who they think she should be in a way. And so yeah, so that was just like a deeper layer that James Baldwin provided for me. Last question: what book would you recommend the character? You know what? I usually try to have these ready. I didn't have I don't have the Let's see. I'm gonna pick something from my shelf right now. I got one. Hold on. All right. I'm going to recommend The Little, I don't know, A Little Devil in America by Hanifa Durkheeb. Hopefully, I haven't recommended this book for any of the other characters. Um, but you'll probably be seeing this again. I can't get enough of Hanifa Durkheeb. I read every all his like full length books basically. I do have a couple of books lined up for him that where he's been a contributor to that I will at some point next year be talking about. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But I am bringing this up for Claudia because I cannot stop talking about this. The author themselves talk about this photo, and it's just like to capture what he's trying to say, and that is there's these two people. They're in like some sort of dance competition, and the woman over here, she's so excited and she's like smiling. I kind of feel like it'll get fuzzy if I get closer. And she's just so excited that what he's capturing, which the author could say way better and way more eloquently than I can, is it's kind of like that euphoria, that excitement of you're doing a thing and you're actually doing it, and then you're so excited about like the thing you're doing. You're like, we're doing it, and that was genuinely the emotion that the author wanted to convey in this book. Um, and he was going through so many different like covers, and he was just being so specifically picky about this one and what he wanted to capture until he landed on this, and he's like, this is the one. This photo from this dance competition is it. And it's called in praise of Black performance, and this is largely focused on American artists, but not just an impact in America but like internationally. And it's nonfiction essays. So just like James Baldwin's is nonfiction essay, this is also a nonfiction essay, but where James Baldwin is critiquing in the ways that cinema and plays, or let's go further, pop culture is not allowing for representation, a diverse representation. What Hanifa Durkheeb is doing here is he's celebrating all the ways in which there have been and is representation. And so he gives, like, he's giving flowers to all these like incredible Black artists. And I love, this is like, he's capturing everything as far as like the ups and downs of artists and their impact. And it's also like this love letter of like, don't forget these people, because plenty of them have already like passed. So it's like a remembrance, and let's just keep their names in the zeitgeist because they're so important to as contributors to their art form. Anyways, I could go on and on about this book. It's supposed to be about James Baldwin instead of talking about Hanif. Any chance I can talk about Hanifa Durkheeb, I'm going to do it. So yeah, I definitely think that I think she would love this book. I think she would love this author, but also I'm biased because it's like one of my all-time favorite authors. So yeah, that's a wrap on Claudia's bookshelf. If you read any books for this, uh, any of the prompts, please let me know what that was. What was your experience? I'm so thankful that I had a chance to just kind of like read all these books. That's pretty cool. So it was definitely an experience. As you know, I was supposed to focus on Claudia for like 2 months. It turned into like 3 months because life has just been too crazy. But I'm glad I did it. So thank you so much. I hope if you participated again, go ahead and have a chat with me about it. I'd love to hear what your thoughts. The next character is Daniel. Daniel's coming up. What else did I want to say? Keep your eyes out for the videos for Daniel. Um, Thank you for just going on this journey with me. It's been a lot of ups and downs. Um, and I want to give you a heads up about something, but let me hold off on that. So with that said, if you're watching this, please press like, and if you want to support my cat's health insurance, please press that subscribe button. Just remember, life is chaos, so be kind to yourself mostly and to others, and read more books.